Module 5, Video 1, Issues and Options. Topic 1, Maintaining Judicial Independence and Collaboration.
Working as part of a collaborative team is not antithetical to maintaining judicial independence. It's really ensuring that there are clear boundaries as part of that team, not necessarily written down, not necessarily part of protocols that are committed to writing, but a clear understanding between myself and the other members of the team that discussions do not take place about individual persons who are appearing before the court outside the court. Really, that's the principal approach that I've taken since the inception of the NJC, and that has worked well. There's never really been any difficulties with that, and people clearly understand that.
It's really important to remember to have any conversations about the person in court and in open court. There's a tendency, I think, particularly if you're in a smaller court, for your credit bail workers or your KISS workers or forensic care workers or whatever, to be able to come in and out of magistrates' chambers and talk about cases, and that needs to be avoided. And so if there's going to be report back from those people, then it should be an open court where everyone can hear what is going on. I have had occasion where that person is not available. For example, forensic care, we only have a few days per week, and we need to talk to that person between now and the next date. And in those circumstances, it's very rare, but I have got the consent of all the parties in court for me to have a discussion about, to get the report from that person and have a discussion about what services might be available. But the prosecution and the defence has said that yes, that's okay, and then I've reported back that conversation in open court.
Topic 2, Time Pressure and Resource Shortages.
It's more challenging in a court where there's greater separation between people. One of the real advantages of the Neighbourhood Justice Centre is that there isn't the big separation of everybody. And of course there's only one magistrate, there isn't a group of magistrates, and there isn't a large registry, and there isn't a large security. So the scale is on a much smaller scale, so it enables that greater connection. In a larger court where there is a group of magistrates and a group of registry staff, it is more challenging. I'm sure just must be. Doesn't mean that it's impossible, but it is, I think, must be a greater challenge to be able to have a more collaborative environment.
I think people often talk about the difficulties of applying TJ in a busy court, but to me, TJ starts with personalising and humanising the approach that I'm taking to the person who's before me, the accused person before me. And those things are essential whether your court is busy or your court is quiet or you're at the NJC. So it's things like using a person's name instead of calling them the accused, of engaging with them as much as is possible, of not objectifying them when speaking to their lawyers. It's a whole range of strategies that I would just describe as being humane, rather than worrying too much about the sort of sophistications of the theories.
I think the key to applying TJ approaches in a busy mainstream court, and I'm at Dandenong, so it's a very busy court, is to target. And I think we need individually, but even as collectively, to think about what are the sorts of cases that should be targeted for these sorts of approaches. Now, a lot of people come into court and they, may come in once, they'll, get the fine for their drink driving and never come back to court again. But then you have other people who are coming back over and over again, and the fact that they are coming back over and over again is not an efficient use of resources. So if we can target those people and make sure that we're actually doing things that are meaningful and useful for their rehabilitation, then in the longer term we can stop reoffending, and all the research shows recidivism is reduced by these approaches.
Now, I agree with Pauline about identifying obviously appropriate cases, And I think if you can identify something, and you have to do it fairly quickly in a busy court, then in a situation where you might want to engage with the accused person, have dialogue with them or about issues and how it might be appropriate to go about dealing with those, you would, in my view, perhaps stand the matter down till a time, say in the 10 minutes or so before lunch, when the advantage of that is that you have a set time to deal with these matters, and also the person that you're directing your remarks to, and you might want some feedback, might be more comfortable in engaging when other people will have left the courtroom, and knowing that there's not going to be, for instance, any other matters before lunch.
We're very fortunate at Melbourne that there is an understanding and broad acceptance that therapeutic justice is practiced in the mainstream court. We don't limit TJ to the problem-solving courts. It is a given that we all practice these techniques now, and we've been very fortunate that that's now built into our schedule. So I, for example, have a full day of part heards and a half day of part heards every month, so that I can deal with my cases once I've identified in using the targeted approach that Pauline just spoke about. So thankfully I do have the time to devote, once I've identified something in the mainstream, to then refer it into my part heard list. And the other important thing is that we need to know what's available in our local community so that we can make suggestions and direct people to services that might be of assistance.
I agree with what Jelena says too. Working in a community, I think we need to know the community, know the services that are available, let people know that we need their assistance to deliver meaningful outcomes, because many times the people that we're dealing with are also the people that health workers or other agencies are dealing with, and there is an opportunity to collaborate with people outside of the court.
Topic 3. Pros and cons of the therapeutic approach.
Well, the advantages are that it's more satisfying in so much as you see people change, particularly over a length of time. You don't just see them on one episode when they come to court and sentence. You see them during the deferred sentencing period and potentially over the period that they're subject to judicial monitoring. And it's very often a profound change in how people present, what they look like, what their skin's like, what their eyes are like, and their overall health is really profoundly different from what they might have been 6 months ago. That's very satisfying. The disadvantages are that it's more emotionally demanding. It requires more emotional demands upon the judicial officer. That's self-evident and clear. And in that sense, it is not just an intellectual exercise, but it's an emotional exercise, and therefore it's more demanding.
I find that engaging in therapeutic treatment processes just increases my satisfaction with my work. I think increased effort directly corresponds to increased satisfaction with the outcomes of my work. And I think I would be much more unhappy if I were more confined to more traditional methods of operating in a courtroom.
I can't imagine now trying to do my work without using TJ principles and without the services that are available at the court. It's not a question of judicial satisfaction with my work, it's simply that I don't think I'd be able to do my work as effectively without those strategies and without those resources. On my part heard days, I feel an absolute buzz, because having people come back before me who have worked so hard to change their lives and are working hard to making better lives for themselves, and coincidentally not committing the crimes that are concerning the community so much, is just a joy. one of the things that we don't often have is the same prosecutor. But most recently on my parenthood day, I had the prosecutor who was in court the day I put a whole lot of people on KISP. She must have had the bail applications in court one. And she said that for her it was such a surprise to see how well people had done. She hadn't backed my judgment on releasing some of these people on bail, but once she saw their progress, even after a month or two, she was very surprised and supportive of the program. So it's made me a better magistrate on so many levels to use the techniques that we've been learning and developing now over many years.
The successes that you find when parties come back after you've directed them to undertake counselling or treatment or some other work going towards the cause of their offending, they come back in a different frame in some respects, is very gratifying and far outweighs disappointments that inevitably arise when there are the failures.
With therapeutic jurisprudential approaches, you achieve some extraordinary successes and you do see people's lives change effectively before your eyes over the period of time that you're engaged with them. And somehow, although there are of course many failures, the successes far outweigh those failures.
I think it's really important to have resources like this to learn the techniques, because there are techniques, and TJ comes from the social sciences, and the social sciences tell us what works. So accessing where you can things like Michael King's bench book, this resource, other types of resources that are out there to learn the techniques will give you more confidence to do this.
Module 5 also includes the following resources: background materials,